This Fed Gov Today program is sponsored by Leidos. On this edition of Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose, ICE takes an international lead in law enforcement collaboration, the AI impact on your agency's enterprise operations, and an exit conversation with the now former Federal Chief Information Security Officer. Chris DeRusha is here. Welcome to Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose. Immigration and Customs Enforcement will be the chair of an international partnership of law enforcement agencies for the next 16 months or so. ICE received the duties of the chair of the Five Eyes Law Enforcement Group from Australia last October. Patrick Lechleitner is Deputy Director and Senior Official performing the duties of Director of ICE. PJ, welcome back. It's good to see you again. What is this partnership? Who all's involved, and what do you partner with them on? Welcome.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks, Francis. The Five Eyes Law Enforcement Group was started in 2006, and it's of like-minded Western society. So at the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. And it's just all the federal, at our point, the federal law enforcement agencies. You know, it's the RCMP, it's the British NCA, National Crime Agency, Australian Federal Police, New Zealand Federal Police. And it's to get the leadership together so we know each other, know one another, so we can collaborate, coordinate, train in an effort to combat transnational crime in a meaningful way. It's really important not to have these individuals as the first call be when there's an issue and there's a security problem. You want to have good ongoing relationships. So we meet at the leadership level a couple times a year at least. We see each other probably more than that depending on where we're traveling. And we also have numerous working groups that collaborate, and it's across mission space. So it could be on IT, it could be on programmatic criminal areas that we work, it could be just on logistics training, just trying to make our organizations better, cooperate better, and work better for our populaces.
Last time you were on the show, we talked about the collaboration among other DHS components and other components of the federal government, state and local, some of the collaborations that you have there. How is collaborating with a foreign government, with another sovereign nation, the same or different from those kinds of cross-governmental collaborations within the United States?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's the same but very different as well. It's challenging because we're separate governments. We have sovereign abilities, but it's also in some ways easier because we have problem sets that we just simply can't get done in those different jurisdictions or separate from that. So although Five Eyes is the 5 countries and all of our collective agencies, we also collaborate around the globe with allies combating these threats. And what we do is try and leverage our best practices and see what works in our given area versus what works in, say, Canada or UK, and what are our commonalities, what are our strengths, and what are our weaknesses. That's even more important. So maybe we're not as good about something as, say, our Australian counterparts, so they have better relationships, so we can partner with them and it assists us all.
How much of this collaboration is based on information and data sharing, PJ?
A ton of this is information and data sharing because we just simply need more and more of that to collaborate and action our operations for our people. So it's a ton of data sharing, a ton of information.
You're undertaking a modernization effort aimed at that exact thing. I read ICE is undertaking a large-scale modernization effort that promotes transparency in the public's access to data. And it sounds like it's not just the public that you want to be able to share that information with more easily and more often, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Sometimes when you think of enterprise transformation, it's just that people think it's IT improvements and it's advancing technologies. But we also want to make it meaningful for our personnel, our partners as the Five Eyes, and also our customer base, quite frankly. So in ICE, we have a civil immigration portfolio. So we have a data dashboard that's forward-facing. It's very easy to use. I can use it. If I can use it, it's very easy to use. And so people can find out where people are, what kind of arrest data is there with detainee data, alternatives to detention and removal data is all there. There's also an online detainer locator system that allows the families to find out where these individuals are and non-citizen access there. Also, we've just upgraded that so that we're also capturing our partner CBP data. So they're the border force of it. We're not. So we have the interior and the removal piece on the civil immigration side. But now we're partnering so that our information captures their data if people that are held for more than 48 hours. So it's a very, very useful tool for our customer base, if you will. And we're trying to make our modernizations really meaningful for both our personnel, our department, the interagency, and the American people.
So speaking of collaboration, I imagine that just the tactical things that you had to do to be able to share that information with CBP, relying on that collaboration with them was tremendously important to make sure that that data is formatted correctly to go back and forth and so on.
Yes, absolutely. We need to crosswalk that. We work very closely with the departments, OCIO shop, to make sure all that data is normalized and it's up to date. So we have very, very strict guidelines on that. And it's complicated, but it's necessary.
I read that you have years of accumulated data that you're working to make more accessible and usable so we, ICE, can enhance how we share data with the public. What's that look like from a data perspective? And I know you're not a data scientist, but I imagine that it's important for executive leadership to understand how that data is collated, curated, and so on, whether it's old or new.
Yeah, no, it's a tremendous amount of data, and we need to make sure it's organized and properly formatted, it's shareable, and we are speaking from the same sheet of music. So example, we have, within ICE and our civil immigration piece of it, there's CBP, they have their civil immigration piece, but there's also USCIS that has a big piece of that, and outside of the department in the Executive Office of Immigration, the immigration courts, they have a piece. And we need to collate all that data, make sure that it's understandable, make sure that we're not double counting, misreporting it, and making sure that we really kind of focus and have a good relationship of that data across the departments.
We talked a little bit before we went on the air about the fact that most of the time when somebody says, when an agency says to me, we're in a modernization effort, it's really IT focused. As I read through this, there are IT components to your modernization effort, but it's more broadly, it sounds like, an attempt to modernize your business processes first, and then the IT modernization comes along behind that. Am I reading that right?
It's completely right. And in fact, one of our focuses within our enterprise transformation, which we're undertaking for the enterprise, is on hiring and position management. So we really need to do a lot more work there. So we're focusing. So we've had an outside contract come in, take a look, benchmark, internal, external, and also with our customers and our internal needs. And we have a deliverable coming back later this summer on that. We're really trying to push forward with as many efficiencies as possible. It's not just pure IT, it's driven by the mission. And you could say the same thing on the HSI side, which is a criminal investigative piece. We're trying to apply large language models on our data sets to really make it more understandable so that we're not missing victims and we're going to catch all the perpetrators we can.
Those large language models take me to artificial intelligence. Everybody wants to talk about AI. Everybody seems to want to use AI. How are you taking an approach to that at ICE when you're thinking about this modernization effort? I imagine it's really tempting to try to sprinkle on some kind of new technology, and it sounds like you're maybe being a little bit more apprehensive, might not be the right word, but I think you get where I'm going with that.
No, absolutely, and you have to. Listen, technology is agnostic, but it can be used for ill or good, and we're using it for good. We want to make sure there's proper controls in place, and we have good human oversight for all of that artificial intelligence. So nothing's just happening in a vacuum. An example of where we're using some of that artificial intelligence is in our victimization piece. So we're dealing with CSEA, which is child sexual exploitation, and we're going after that and seeing what kind of artificial intelligence will help us in those investigations, and also in war crimes, going after war criminals that are here in the country. So very, very surgical, very controlled, with appropriate oversight and approvals all the way up the chain.
We have about a minute left, PJ. How do you avoid the risk in a modernization effort like this that you'll get to a point where you'll complete these tasks and people go, okay, we're modern, and we can sit back and rest on our laurels?
Well, I think we're lucky in a regard that I don't think we'll ever get there. So I wish we would, but I honestly don't. We're chronically underfunded, and listen, our partners in Congress and administration are doing everything they can. It's not just an ICE or a DHS problem. But there's limited resources, so I wish we get to that point where that's that problem. But we honestly are always looking to make things better, and we're going to continue to evolve in this mission space.
PJ, it's great to have you back on the show. Thank you,
Francis.
Today. You can read more about ICE's modernization efforts and the Five Eyes Law Enforcement Group on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, the AI impact on your agency's enterprise operations. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment. Here's Michael McCaleb, Vice President of Government Programs and Strategy at Carahsoft, on innovation in government from Sea Air Space, presented by Carahsoft.
And so there's some moves afloat that they understand that a college degree is important, but the the direction that we're starting to see is that the credentialing is more important, is that taking somebody that has a particular IT skill, not a degree in computer science, but has been through the National Testing Center, the certification is more relevant to today's workforce. I think that the industry needs to pay a lot of attention of how they help young men and women coming out of high school, to energize them, to give them the passion, and of course the passion is self-generated, to get them into those programs. I've seen a significant increase in community colleges. We need industry to be inside the community college, helping the community college put the curriculum together to produce the nuclear welder, or to produce the person that's going to come on and run cables and do the installation of some very complex electronic warfighting systems.
For more, go to innovationingov.com. Welcome back. Several guiding documents from federal agencies are shaping the way departments of the government are dealing with artificial intelligence. New guidance from the General Services Administration on AI acquisition, and from the Office of Personnel Management on AI usage by employees and building an AI-ready workforce are the documents agencies are tracking. Seth Abrams is Chief Technology Officer for Homeland and Force Protection at Leidos. Seth, welcome. Thanks for joining me. Those are the policy and strategy documents that the government is looking at. What should they be thinking about, though, from an enterprise perspective, about how AI intersects with the work they're trying to do across agencies?
Yeah, when it comes to agency application of technology, we really want to focus on the results, right? We want to focus on the mission. And what ends up happening is that when new technology comes in, there's a big rush to adopt to it. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we keep control of the quality that you've established over time. We had a big switch to Agile, and with that switch, we introduced all these pipelines that introduced a lot of controls. And so when AI comes in, you want to make sure that those same controls are applied.
Mm-hmm. When, from an enterprise perspective, what do you expect to see change, or what are you starting to see change already as agencies get more use cases put into pilot programs and put into actual use?
Yeah, well, we're seeing a lot of back-end adoption, which is really great, right? Because I think that's the place where the AI really shines. When you have a massive amount of data and you need to comb through it and get more eyes on it, AI really shines. What we're seeing is that on the same side, when you do developers using AI, then you can have a really bigger increase of productivity when it comes to getting code out, the quality of control, security controls around it. And so what you're left with is, AI-enabled developers, which is really great.
What do you expect to see moving forward in that intersection of AI and software development, and how can agencies really leverage the potential that you just described?
Well, there's new technologies coming out all the time, and so there's assisted code development, but at the same time, on the big data front, now we're starting to introduce a lot of generative AI investigations. And so it used to be that people needed to know how to write SQL code in order to do investigations, and now what we can do is use natural language models to actually ask the question and then start getting some really good answers.
You talked about the fact that this technology is changing rapidly. Innovation has a tendency sometimes to be overcome by agencies trying to make sure they don't get too far over their skis. How are you seeing agencies that are successful at letting innovation bloom in this area do so within the guardrails that they need to stay in?
Right, well, so at Leidos we set up a guardrail ourselves, right? So we have a framework for AI resilience and security. And so what that allows them to do is it allows them to experiment with AI and really adapt the new technologies that are out there, and at the same time have those guardrails. And so you can basically turn up the dial where it goes from, a person on the loop to person in the loop to person out of the loop, right? And so that dial mechanism is really what we're looking at, making sure that the agencies structure around.
There are a lot of agencies that are telling me that kind of a sandbox, that ability to experiment, is really important to them. What's the advantage that the agency gains by doing that, by having that ability?
Oh, it's huge. So what we think about the government is that it's where we get trusted answers from, right? And so to make sure that we don't have governments putting out answers that we're not supposed to, and so what that allows you to do is that allows you to build a kind of your guardrails around the information that you're supposed to be giving to your constituents.
I'll ask you the hard one. We have about a minute left, because over the horizon, it's impossible to predict based on what we've seen over the last several years regarding AI. But what are you encouraging agencies to anticipate now about how they should prepare for a year out, 2 years out, and so on?
Well, there's two different sides to it, right? So agencies should be prepared for, being able to do a lot more with the data that they have, right? So don't get rid of it. We're going to be able to start to mine that. But on the flip side, the adversaries also have AI. And so we're going to have to make sure that our AI defenses are up to speed as well.
Seth, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks very much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you.
You can read more about artificial intelligence in government on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, Chris DeRusha, the now former Federal Chief Information Security Officer, is here when Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment. Here's C.T. Thomas, Technical Director for AI at Dell Technologies, from the Carahsoft Artificial Intelligence for Government Summit.
Near edge, far edge, or the tactical edge. Prior Navy guy myself, so I'm used to being disconnected, right? Not a lot of enterprises or commercial businesses deal with being disconnected for hours or days at a time. That's a nuance that only the government has as a standard part of their operating procedure. So I think that that federated architecture will become more and more prominent, and you'll start to make these decisions or do the inferencing exactly where the data is being created versus sending that upstream or paying for an ingress, egress cost from a hyperscaler, right? And then the security comes into play, right? I don't want to move that data if I don't have to. So you truly have to think through the process and what your intent and goals are.
For more, go to innovationingov.com. Welcome back. A leader that's been involved in all the important cyber work that's come out of the Office of Management and Budget and the Office of the National Cyber Director in the past several years is leaving the federal government. Chris DeRusha stepped down as Federal Chief Information Security Officer and Deputy National Cyber Director in mid-May. Chris, welcome. It's great to see you. Congratulations on your time in government. What's your sense of where the federal government is and the agencies collectively in the cyber mission that they've undertaken?
Yeah, well, first, Francis, thank you for having me. It's a great opportunity, as I depart to kind of reflect on all of what I believe is a lot of progress that we made in this administration. Look, this is a job that's never done. I think we picked up on the mantle of a lot of hard work for us. Wrote a national cyber strategy, had a very large and impactful executive order that we got to implement. I feel really good about the accomplishments over the last 3 years. I have both data to look at through our FISMA collections, where we've set targets that are proxies to how we're doing in all the initiatives we set out, and we see progress across all of those. I also feel good about the qualitative assessments when I chair the Federal CISO Council, for example, or did. And you just hear all the stories of massive switchovers from a VPN to a SASE solution, where they're able to now have employees securely access applications over the internet and get network efficiencies and things like this. And you hear these migrations occurring, and they're real live examples. And so I think there's a lot of both hard and anecdotal evidence that we're moving in the right direction. But I would also caution that you're never going to be done here, right? The risks are changing, the threats are changing, the technology is moving fast, and this is one of those things where don't ever pat yourself on the back. Just sort of check down on, are you doing the right things? You need to make adjustments on that, and are you moving in the right direction?
Something that I think is significant that's happened in the last several years, you alluded to a moment ago, and maybe didn't even know that you did when you talked about the work that you've done as the chair, former chair now of the CISO Council. It strikes me that the Chief Information Security Officers are more integrated into the C-suite than they ever have been before, that they have a say, along with the CIOs, as to what happens with some of those decisions that you just talked about. Is that something that you saw from the chair as well?
It is. We've had a lot of support, in particular from the COOs of agencies, deputy secretaries, and we've leveraged their role in the agency to ensure that they're amplifying. I will keep the agency anonymous, but in my tenure, I even had one front office come our way and say, hey, we'd like to maybe have the CISO report directly to the cabinet head. And it's like, well, there's a lot of reasons that I cautioned and advised against that, but I said, that's the right idea, where you do want an agency head saying, hey, I'm also the CISO, right? This person's direction to you and priorities are my priorities. And I think that in any company or agency that's being really successful, you do have that cultural value.
You certainly understand the spirit of it, if not the letter of that idea. What is the current state of execution in your mind of the cyber executive order that came out under your watch?
Yeah, so this is Executive Order 14028 issued in May of 2021. What's lovely is you can now take GAO's word for how well we're doing. They put out a report, I believe, in April, and they were counting about 55 enterprise actions that we were governing. And in their words, not mine, 49 of those 55 are complete, and 5 of those are partially complete, and 1 was not applicable. So, I think that speaks for itself. And that's the work of the agencies. That is the work of these teams who are just heroes on the line every day, not just fighting off the adversary, but also implementing all of the requirements to make sure the technology is more secure.
I don't remember who it was. It was a former CIO as a guest on the Fed Gov Today podcast when the EO came out that called that timeline very aggressive. Did you think it was aggressive when you created it, and how confident were you that those deadlines could be met to the degree that they were, or did you have an idea that, well, let's make these stretch goals and let's see how the agencies can do?
Yeah, I think that's the right way to think about it. I did have concerns with the timelines, and some of them started more aggressive in our drafting, honestly. I think it was this urgent moment. And we negotiated on sort of what we thought we could accomplish the fastest that we could without damaging the integrity of the work that we needed to produce, right? You do have to have quality work. And we broke a couple of those too, but we got a draft done and we did public comment, for example, for the Zero Trust strategy to ensure that we were getting it right. You're doing something new, you want to make sure you're doing it with the best minds available to you. And I think that's where we may have been slower on implementation of some of the things. But I got to tell you, we had Tiger teams galore, people off other work on this, and I think there was a stretch there where I was working every night for a good 6 months straight.
When you look at the way that people talk about these issues now, too, I imagine that's a positive, that Zero Trust is kind of the coin of the realm in cyber across government now. And some of these other concepts that you promoted and that you wrote policies or helped to write policies about from both OMB and ONC, I imagine that's maybe one of the best things that you think has happened under your tenure, that these are now the way that the agencies think about these cyber issues?
Yeah, I feel that way. When you think about, for me, our Zero Trust strategy is really a security modernization approach. We were able to, again, build something with the best minds in the country, set specific targets and goals, have common baselines for what success looked like across all the agencies. We were able to tie that to budget, because now we're doing strategy-based budgeting. Then we're able to do data calling off of that and map tool buys and service buys and hiring to different lines in the Zero Trust strategy, and be able to roll up for the budget examiner and the director of OMB, one of my bosses, boss, here's the evidence of what we're spending on what we believe is a very viable and good strategy. And I think gone are the days when you just say cyber and people say, here's money. You need to do that now. And that's one of the things that I try to promulgate when I'm out about speaking about this, is there's a lot more value than just sort of getting the right technical approach and getting progress. You can also align things like budgeting and contracts and stuff like that as well. What
did you not get a chance to finish before you left that you wish you could have finished, or that you will follow very closely and now that you're out?
Yeah, there's, following some of the big technological trends, of course. So, you're speaking to Seth about AI. There's a lot of work that's going to need to be done there to effectively govern and manage risks from AI, and then leveraging AI to, work against those risks. Also, post-quantum, I think that is a very real risk that's coming our way. There is still some time, but, when you're talking about the amount of modernization that needs to occur, there's not much time. But also, one of the things I'm most excited about that I think that we have definitely made progress on is really this concept that's being very well promulgated by CISA, DHS CISA, which is the secure by design effort. They had a pledge that they launched in RSA, getting all the companies to sign and say, we'll follow these practices. We put out at OMB, with CISA's close partnership, the first ever secure software attestation form. So that's saying, hey, if you're a company that sells to government, you got to sign this, and your CEO or another committing official for your company needs to be signing this and saying that you're following these practices. And I think that's really important. I mean, for instance, if there's the number one way that we can really change the dynamic of chasing all of these incidents and risks that we've got, it's if we're going to design the technology more securely and provision it by default more securely as well.
Chris, I look forward to seeing what's next for you. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Francis. Good to be here.
You can read more about all the cyber topics Chris covered on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today continues in a moment. Here's Jared Shepard, President and CEO of Hypori, from Innovation in Government at SoftWeek, presented by Carasoft.
Ultimately, data is the currency in which, the Department of Defense operates, in a lot of ways, whether it's information superiority of the battlefield, whether it's intelligence, whatever it happens to be. Cyber resilience becomes so important because we have to establish not just information dominance, but communications dominance on a battlefield before we ever go in there. The reason why it's unique for SOF, for the SOF community, on the white side of SOF, they have what's called, FID, Foreign Internal Defense, but the mission of SOF is much more dynamic, and there's a lot more variables than strategic military when you're going into a known space, movement to contact, that kind of thing. The unconventional side of the house, they may have to go in and develop relationships with host nation forces, assist host nation forces in preparing for activity, things like such in Ukraine or others, but all while being aware of the fact that there are near-peer nation states that are going to try to exploit, identify, target, and use information ultimately against them.
For more, go to innovationingov.com. Welcome back. In today's event spotlight, U.S. Cyber Command and the Defense Information Systems Agency are the headliners again this year at AFCEA International's TechNet Cyber. It's coming June 25th to 27th at the Baltimore Convention Center. The speaker list already includes General Timothy Hawk, the commander of U.S. Cyber Command and director of the NSA, the Pentagon CIO, John Sherman, and the director of DISA, Lieutenant General Robert Skinner. You can read more about TechNet Cyber and register at fedgovtoday.com/events. FedGov Today TV returns next Sunday morning at 10:30 with Danielle Metz, the CIO of the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and the Director of the Open Source Enterprise at the Central Intelligence Agency, Randy Nixon. I'm Francis Rose. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.